Hi, everyone. How are you today? Hope every one of you is doing fantastic. Welcome to LUAN Live Sessions. I want to give you a big warm welcome to today's session. In LUAN's Emotional Museum, we promote humanism through art, bringing inspiring voices from the intersection of art, ethics, and mindfulness into the lives of individuals in many different countries. My name is Marion from LUAN Emotional Museum, and I want to thank you all so much for being here today with us. Please write in the chat box your name and your country of origin. So let's begin our journey together in this beautiful Wednesday. It is my pleasure to welcome today sex and intimacy coach Haneen Khan. She's founder of Sex Homework Society. Haneen is on a mission to bring unashamed authenticity in the bedroom and beyond. She is obsessed with connecting to the body's wisdom and believes that real intimacy happens when we risk rejection and allow ourselves to be truly, truly seen. After her black sheep days in the corporate world, Haneen spent 2 years curating sensual theater and play parties in London, which led to the birth of her business running sexual empowerment courses. She's passionate about freeing humans of the performance and scriptedness of sex so that we can experience our erotism without shame. Trained in a blend of somatic coaching, sexology, wheel of consent, Tantra, NVC, and internal family systems therapy, Haneen delivers her message with unapologetic silliness. So this topic about being a guilt-free receiver is something really important for us in LUAN. Why? Because I believe it's important to add into the conversation, those themes and those topics that we usually don't talk about, right? And most of the times have to do with, sexuality, and other times about money, right? And it's kind of like these taboo themes that we all of us human beings have some sort of interaction with these topics every day, but we usually don't talk about them that often. So that's why we're opening the conversation, and we invited, this Haneen, that she's amazing, to be today with us and give this session with our LUAN community. So in today's session, how to be a guilt-free receiver, we'll explore how would it look like to fully bathe in the gift of receiving. Do you have trouble, with receiving? Not only in the sexual sense, but maybe in the relationship sense, right? To feel zero expectation, to give something back in return. Do you feel like you need, you're pressuring yourself to look like you're enjoying it? Or to not to worry about your giver's experience, like checking all the time, constantly, are they okay, right? To trust yourself that you can voice feedback to improve your experience. I know this might sound really easy, but sadly it is not. There is so much in guessing, in discomfort, in wearing, insecurities involved in giving and in receiving, because it is so vulnerable to ask for what you want, let alone to actually receive what you want and stay connected to your experience of it. So Haneen will share a new definition of receiving that is going to make you go crazy, to dive into your relationship with giving, because it will shed an interesting light on how you can receive, to empower you with the tools to notice your desires and boundaries. Really important topic to also cover boundaries. In this session, we invite you to gently bring your power back. We will connect deeply to the place in your heart that feels that fear, that feels that shame, that feels that guilt about receiving, and come back to loving ourselves. It is only when we can give with an open heart that we can receive with an open heart. So Haneen, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today with us and to cover this important topic for us human beings.
Such a pleasure. I love this topic. So thank you, Marianne, for inviting me into this beautiful community. And if people are able to put on videos, I'd love to see some faces, but I'm also loving the fact that you're from all over the world, from India to Africa to the UK. So yeah, it's beautiful to be here. And I'm going to dive right in. This is a really, as Marianne was saying, receiving is going to be, this is really not just about sex and pleasure. It's really about your ability to receive in everyday life. So you're going to notice parallels, and I'm going to cover, all of from all angles. I think I want to start by understanding where everyone feels resistance in receiving. So how do we actually experience, right? If you've come here there's a part of you that has some challenge in experiencing receiving. I'm going to guess that, otherwise you wouldn't be here, right? So it's not enough just to say, well, I don't find receiving very pleasurable, or I find myself in my head. There's usually something a little bit more specific going on. So I'm gonna say I think 7 or 8 different reasons. If it resonates with you, put the number in the chat. So if I say number 1 is blah, 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 put 1 in the chat so I can get an idea of like who is finding what difficult. So the first one is, I feel resistance because I feel like I'm expected to give something in return. That's 1. So when I receive, I feel guilty because I feel like I feel it's transactional. Who relates to that? Pop that in the chat.
So if you really relate to that, you put 10, and if you don't relate to that, you put 1, right?
You just put 1. It's like you put just like, I guess not everyone's going to, yeah. If you don't reply, that means you don't relate to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah, I kind of like the way that you did. Okay, some people are doing it that way. So 10 is, what did you say, Marion?
10 is that it happens that a lot to you, right? That if you receive, you feel the pressure to give back, and 1 is that it doesn't happen to you.
Perfect. Okay, beautiful. Let's do it that way. All right. Second one. It feels uncomfortable because the attention is on me, and that feels, I feel a little bit unworthy of all of that attention. So how much does that resonate with you? Yeah. And you might find that that's more common perhaps for females than males. Okay. So third reason, because you feel pressure to show you're in pleasure, which stops you from letting go. So when you're receiving, you're like, oh yeah, oh that feels so nice. Oh yeah, just over there, yeah. And you're kind of putting on a little bit of this performance to show that you're in pleasure, which stops you from being able to fully receive. So who relates to that? That's definitely one of mine. Okay. So I've got 3 more. Because you're in your head worrying about their enjoyments. So you're more preoccupied by your giver's experience than yours. You're concerned of like, are they okay? Are they still enjoying themselves? Are they tired? Am I taking too long to orgasm? So you're really concerned about the giver's experience. Yeah, we've got a few 10s here. Yeah, that's a really common one. Another common one, because I don't really know what I want. I don't know how to give feedback. So like, I when you're a receiver, you need to take agency and be able to say, oh, a little harder, please, a bit softer, or a bit more of this or that. But it's difficult to do that if we don't know what we want. Yeah, lots of 10s for this one too. Don't fear, we will get to the solutions in a moment. And then let's see. Because I can't really feel pleasure. So I'm a bit numb, right? Like, so my route to direct pleasure feels shut down. Thank you, David. Yeah, a few high numbers on that one too. And then the last one is because I feel shameful about my desires. So maybe you want to receive, but you want to be pegged or choked, or you want to have like people watch you have sex, or whatever it is. You feel shameful about asking for it. So that's why it's difficult for you to receive, because you feel shameful about your desires. Okay. So don't fear if you've written 10 for every single one, or 1 for, there'll be something for all of you in there. So just to get a little bit of an idea. So if I also want to just say, by the way, that all of these reasons are totally valid, and they'll come from like various conditioning, right? The way that we've been brought up in our family environments, your parents' relationship to pleasure, your school, the messaging you receive from school, from religion, from media. I'm not going to go into that because you've only got an hour, but just know that there's a historical reason for you to feel this way. And that's not what the problem is. We will focus more on how to bring more love to that part of you that's feeling that fear and resistance. So this is a fun section. So now we know to some degree what we have trouble with. I'd be really curious to see how it actually manifests. So how does this practically show up? If it's a struggle for you, for example, because you find it, you're shameful of your desires, or you're finding it a struggle because you don't know what you want, so you don't know how to articulate, how does it actually show up? So you can have a think about this, and I'm going to say a few, and like if you resonate, let me know, say it, let me know in the chat. So if we don't know how to receive, you might give to get. Okay, so you might do this thing where you start, oh yeah, sure, I'll invite this person round to my house, I'll let them couch surf, because I know that like I'll rack up some debt from them, which means that I can then be able to couch surf at theirs. Or like maybe I'll give them a massage, which means that I can get a massage, right? So we're giving to get, that's a common one. Another one is relying on kind of scraps, right? Like, so like basically it's so normalized. Like if a hand strays in vaguely the right direction and you're like, oh my God, it's amazing. And you're just relying on kind of chance, or like, yeah, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, just luck, I guess, around it. So you're not taking agency. The third one, and this is very popular, is camouflaging your ask. So it's kind of like sneaking and grabbing. And I'll give an example. You might offer someone a massage to help them relax, when really you actually want to touch them yourself. It's really for you, but you pretend it's for them. Okay. Or you might give someone a gift and pretend it's for them, but actually it's because you want them to like you, or you want their attention. Or you might suggest meeting up and you're like, oh, this is for you, like you want to meet up, but actually it's something that you desire, right? So again, it's like, this isn't about me, this is not my desire, it's theirs. So yeah, I've got an 11 from Irina. So yeah, that's a really common one. And then the last one is, you might just be starved. Like you're starved of your needs and you're just like, I'm a giver, that's what I am, that's who I am. And actually inside, you might not realize this, but you're probably building up some kind of like subconscious or conscious resentment and expecting something in return. Maybe it's like, oh, well, the least that my partner can do is do the dishes, or like compliment me. And that you're feeling, yeah, there's this resentment and it's leaking out in other ways, right? So those are the ways that it might come across. And I'm going to actually share a screen because I would love to show you a snippet of a video from Betty Martin, who is like this goddess that I believe. She's a sex educator, and she talks about receiving in a really eloquent way. So I'm just going to do a quick demo, sorry, not demo, 2 minutes of sharing my screen. Where did I put it? There we go. Okay. Let's put her on full screen. And she's basically just going to summarize what I've just said.
What's true about receiving is that it's very often difficult to experience that it's for you. And I'll talk about that in each of the separate quadrants, why that is. But when you do believe it's for you, then you act like it's for you, which means that you ask for what you want. You take the time that you need. You change your mind. When you've had...
I just want to stop there. Ask what you want. Take the time you need, like, and slow down. Like there are various skills involved in receiving. We're going to go into that. But yeah, just make a note.
Not enough, you stop doing it. And the degree to which you are not doing those things, to that degree, you don't quite believe it's for you. And we'll talk about that in the other videos. So when the receiving half of the circle is difficult for you, what happens is that you either avoid it or you dilute it, so you can't really tell. That means you don't ask for what you want, or you don't notice what you want, or you forgot how to notice what you want. And when you don't ask for what you want, your option is either to just kind of starve, or to grab and sneak and get what you want some other way without actually acknowledging it. Also, if it's difficult, you want to have some connection with people. And so you give, because that's your only way that you know how to make a connection with people. In which case your giving is not really giving, but you're giving because it's an effort to get something back, some kind of connection, some kind of acknowledgement, some kind of appreciation. Whereas when you actually learn to receive, you get that in a direct way, and it's very clean and it's very satisfying. There's no ulterior motive in your giving. So learning to receive is really crucial in being clear about your receiving. And of course,
I'm going to stop there. So I love that little snippet. And it really shows you, if you're in, and if you relate to any of these, by the way, let me just cross that out. If you notice you're in this, it means that you are out of consent with yourself. It means that you are not receiving, you're not being in integrity. And so what I'm going to be focusing on during the session is how to bring your agency back, how to start taking responsibility to notice what you want and to articulate what you want. Because the alternative, as you've now understood is really disempowering, and a little bit victim-y. Like it's either a bit rescue-y, it has like a bit rescue, like caretaking energy. It might be a bit perpetrator kind of energy, where it's like, I'm just gonna like sneak and grab thing, like receiving in the ways without being clear about the fact that it's for me. Or it might be a bit victim-y. All of those are like unhealthy sort of ways of getting our needs met. And it's really important to not hate on that. Like now that you've realized that, it's really important that we have love for those parts of us that feel that resistance, because that, like, our resistance is our teacher. So when you notice that you're doing that, can you stop and can you pause and notice what's going on? That's going to be one of the first skills that we're going to dive into today. So I'm going to get you to think, okay, of a time that you might want to just like relax into your chair, close your eyes, and connect with a time, maybe something recent but specific, that you have been and tried to be in the receiving role, and it's been really challenging for you. And maybe it's in one of the ways in which we've just discussed, right? Like you're giving to get something, or maybe you're starved, or maybe you're worried about the giver's experience. And just allow yourself to feel how it is to be you in that moment, that vulnerability. And when you connect with that feeling, I want you to write down the emotion or identity that you're feeling in that. So when you're connecting to a memory of receiving and you're finding it really challenging, what's the emotion involved in that? And there's no right or wrong answer, by the way. So maybe it feels helpless, maybe it feels people pleasery. And in that place, I also want you to connect with what you could do, and you might not have the answer right now, but next time you feel that, what can you do to bring yourself back in consent with yourself? So some ideas would be to ask for a pause, to ask for a hug, to take the time to notice and give specific feedback. It might be asking for some reassurance that the giver is okay and then the giver is taking care of themselves. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get you to have more agency in this, right? Rather than like, oh, this shit thing is happening to me. What can you do to bring yourself back into integrity and to step fully into the zone of receiving with an open heart? So we've kind of covered a little bit more of the emotional component. I want to dive into like the awareness and the skill sets needed to actually be receiving. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the definition of receiving. So most people associate receiving with being done to, right? So if someone was to touch, like to stroke my cheek, then I'm the receiver. If someone was to like massage my head, I'm the receiver. What if someone was to slap me? Am I receiving then? No. So receiving is not necessarily related to who is done to. Just because someone's touching me doesn't mean that I am the receiver. So I'm going to give an example. I don't know if there's anyone that wants to like volunteer, by the way. I'd love to like play with someone. If anyone's happy, then pop your video on and we can do it back and forth. So basically we're just going to do a little bit of a demo on the two types of receiving. Beautiful. Oh, Marianne, thank you, love. Okay. So, oh, I've got
someone raised their hand.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, PRP, do you want to pop your video? If you don't want to pop your video on, that's not a problem. But just maybe unmute yourself so I can hear you.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so how would you like to be called, by the way?
By the same name over here.
Oyo.
Please call me PRP here as well.
PRP. Okay, cool. I'll do that. So if I ask PRP, will you massage my shoulders? And PRP says, I don't know, would you mind saying yes?
As long as you are comfortable.
Okay. I'm going to ask for it. So this is, you're taking care of yourself and I'll take care of myself. So are you happy to give that to me? Will you massage my shoulders?
As long as you are comfortable, I don't mind at all.
Okay. So in that case, who is the receiver and who is the giver? Is it Haneen or is it PRP? It's not a trick question.
So Haneen is a receiver.
Yeah, okay. Haneen's the receiver here. So I'm receiving this touch. I've asked for it. What if I said, may I massage your shoulders, PRP? Who is receiving? Yeah, if he says yes, who's receiving in that situation?
Is
right. Thank you, Irina, and thank you, Mariam. So even though I'm touching him, he is still receiving. So I've given you two examples here, right? One is like I had my shoulders touched and I was receiving, and in the other example, PRP had his shoulders touched. But I was, oh, hang on, sorry. I just gave you the wrong answer. When I said, may I massage your shoulders, PRP? Haneen, I am actually the receiver. I'm just gonna, let that sink. Why am I the receiver? May I massage your shoulders, PRP? He says yes. Because thank you. Not because I asked, because sometimes a giver can also ask, they could say like, would you like a massage? Just because they ask doesn't mean it's you're the one receiving. It's actually because it's for me. It's for me. So can people see that? So in both examples I'm receiving, so PRP was massaging my shoulders and that was for me. I could also be massaging his shoulders and that could be for him. So what distinguishes who's a giver and who's a receiver? It's who it is for. It's who it is for. It's not that both are receiving, by the way, Lily, I'll come on to that, but yeah. So there's two types of receivers and two types of givers. And if you want to look into this framework, by the way, a lot more, it would be called the Wheel of Consent, but I'm not going to dive into that too deeply. Why does this matter that you know this definition? Why give a fuck? By the way, thank you, PRP. You can mute yourself now. Thank you. So why does that matter? Because it affects consent. It affects whether the answer is yes or no. Okay. So I'm going to give a very sexual example here. With my ex-partner, I remember this so well. We were in bed together, and I literally had like I was sitting on his face, and he was licking me out. And I was like, I was feeling like it was a 5 or a 6 out of 5 or 6 out of 10 on the pleasure scale. So I asked him, I was like, babe, are you taking right now? Like, are you the one receiving in this equation? Or are you serving? Like, is this for me or is this for you? Is basically what I was asking. And he went, oh, this is for me. And I went, oh, okay. In which case, great. This is you. You're the receiver. Go for it. If he had said, Haneen, no, it's for you. I want to do what feels really amazing. Like, I want to know what feels like the 10 out of 10 for you. I would have been like, oh, okay. In which case, can you move your tongue this way? And can you apply a bit more pressure? And I would have been more specific. So knowing who it's for affects whether it affects consent. It affects whether you're happy to go for it, right? So if I said to Tanay, who's got his video, and I said, can I stand on your feet? Tanay might say, well, sure, if that's what you want, great. Yeah, no, Tanay, I meant it's for you. And then you'd be like, well, actually, no, I don't want you to stand on my feet. That's not what I want. So do people understand that? Are there any questions on on the definition of receiving and how that affects consent. This is really important to get right. I mean, that's going to be the first skill. No questions. And if there are, by the way, put them in the chat. So, yeah, the first skill is don't make assumptions on whether you are a giver or receiver. Like, how you're feeling isn't an indication of whether you're a giver or receiver. What is an indication is the clarity, is to know who it's for. And to get the clarity, you might just need to ask, right? Otherwise, you're going to end up with two givers. And that happens all the time in sex. You end up with two givers in sex. So, yeah. And yeah, allowers, I call them. You get two allowers. My third point.
I just want to ask you, if someone is trying to tell you that he's doing something for you, but then you don't want that. So in that case, are you receiving or who's receiving?
If I don't want it, so say you offer me a cheek massage and I don't want it, then well, then we stop, and you might offer, and then I might say, actually, what I would like, Nilesh, is for you to I would like you to put your hand on my heart instead. So it just depends on what we negotiate next. If I put an end to that, if I say no, that's not what I want, well, then there's no flow of receiving and giving anyway. Do you want to, or sorry, are you saying, Nilesh, that you continue to say massage my cheeks and I don't want it, but I'm allowing it because that's what you want? If that's
I'm saying that I'm doing it for you.
If you're doing it for me and I don't want to, then I'm the receiver, and it's my responsibility to tell you that that's not what I want. It's my responsibility to say, actually, I prefer something else.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Great. So next point is around pleasure, right? Receiving is inherently pleasurable. So is giving, by the way. Both need to be pleasurable. If they're not, then you're not in consent. So it needs to be pleasure. It needs to be pleasurable. Does anyone want to define what pleasure is?
An activity that would give you pleasure, joy, happiness.
So there's like the emotional component I'm hearing of like, oh, joyfulness, happiness. But I'm getting at something a bit more specific here. Rishi is very close with anything that feels good. And if I was to add to that, anything that feels good, I would say it's I mean, unless anyone else would like to chime in. The intense feeling, not just sexually, but emotional also. Could be that, yeah, connecting to each other. So a lot of these answers are actually interesting because they're very much related to the interpretation of pleasure, right? Which is like, oh, this is nice, I feel happy, right? I'm actually coming back to basics. Pleasure is, it's direct pleasure is the skin receptors to the brain going, oh, I feel this stimulation. It's pleasurable because it feels nice. It's a sensory pleasure. It smells nice. I can hear it, smell it. I'm sorry. The pleasure of hearing something, the pleasure of smelling something, the pleasure of tasting something, the pleasure of skin on your hand, the skin on your hand on your skin. Right. So that's what I call direct pleasure. We can also have what I call indirect pleasure. And this is to the degree that our direct pleasure is a bit shut down. Indirect pleasure is all we have. And indirect pleasure is when we get pleasure from seeing someone smile and moaning and groaning and really enjoying themselves. Okay, in which case your giving is not really giving. You're actually trying to get something. You're trying to get a reaction, and you're trying to be the one receiving by being attached to this person's experience of receiving, if that makes sense. So I'm actually going to read out something to make this very clear because I think it's really important. So, oh yeah, and this will apply, by the way. So if you're the kind of person that goes, giving you pleasure is what gives me pleasure. I mean, hands up if people have ever said that. Giving you pleasure is what gives me pleasure, right? when you say that, you're talking about indirect pleasure. Yeah. Great. Alex says 10 out of 10. Yeah, that's totally, that has been me many, many times. And so the indirect route is like casting a fishing line, hoping to catch something. And whereas, so there's a certain result that's needed, it's contingent on something. Whereas the direct route, there's no result needed. It's just inherently pleasurable as it is. I think there was a question in the chat. What's your take on my opinion? I personally think lovemaking is the purest thing. I mean, there's a lot of comfort and trust towards each other to be that close to each other. I think that's beautiful. I'm not sure it's entirely relevant to the points that I'm making, so I might come back to it at the end if that's all right, just so that we're staying in line with the topic. So, so the problem is, this is what I want to actually say. To the degree that the direct route is closed, you have to use the indirect route because that's all you have. You have to do whatever it takes to get that smile, sigh, or moan, or you have nothing. And this is not giving to someone, this is using them. And now you're both in performance mode. You're trying to perform the right stroke and they are trying to perform the right response. And I have been on both sides of that and I don't recommend it. So the indirect route is a vicarious route. It's a substitute. It means that you don't know how to access pleasure directly, so you use your partner's pleasure instead. And if this one thing is your only route to pleasure, you are probably avoiding something else instead. So this is the issue. I really wanted to get clear that when we are in receiving, I'm really trying to open up this concept of direct pleasure and not relying so much on indirect. I've got a question. And what if they want but won't respond, even indirect routes? I don't quite understand your question. So if you want to come online, Irina, or rephrase, what if that would be very helpful? Feel free to share it in audio form. What if they want but won't respond? Let me know, Irina, if you'd like to. I'll keep going, but I'm very, very happy to answer that question on a rephrase. Charlene had a question. So since we're talking about something essentially experiential, can we categorize acts purely in terms of giving or receiving, since pleasure by definition defies any sort of watertight compartments? Correct. Yes, I want to be explicit here. Pleasure happens throughout life, whether it can happen solo and it can happen relationally. And in today's workshop, I'm really talking about pleasure in relational form, giving and receiving. So I'm not talking about the kind of pleasure where you have a nice hot shower and you're really enjoying it, or you're listening to a great podcast and you feel intellectually stimulated. This is about, relational pleasure. Any other questions? I think it's easy for some people to switch on or off to sensory perception. I'm still in the work. Yes, that's true. And there is, that would make me go into another thing around like brakes and accelerators. There are certain times that we can't feel pleasure because we have our brakes switched on. Don't know whether to get into that right now, but that might be something like you're in a slight stress state. And so your body needs to actually calm down in order for you to be receptive to pleasure. So it might be that you need like you might need to jog, or you might need to like be in a different environment, or you might need to brush your teeth or something that would help you, or pet your dog to help you get into a state of receptivity to pleasure. So I call that, those are called our brakes. So notice you might have brakes on. Okay, so let's plow through. Okay, so I have another question about asking and being asked, right? So we can't give and receive unless we're comfortable with asking and being asked. And I'm kind of curious what people's relationship is to asking others. So when you ask someone and the stakes are pretty high, like you really want it, and the likelihood is like it's probably going to be a no, like maybe you want to ask someone on a date, or maybe you want to ask if you can use that person's house for the weekend. How does that feel? What kind of resistance comes up for you? Pop it in the chat, if at all. What resistance? Fear of rejection. Yes. Thank you, Akshay. That's a very common one, fear of rejection. And there's one more main one. And this is what I experience. Alex, you ask almost as if you're expecting the no. Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. almost as a way to like brace for it or protect, maybe, I'm assuming. But yeah, that does sound like some kind of fear of rejection, being judged, low self-esteem, fear of not meeting the expectation, being self-cautious. Resistance might depend on the person. Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. No one has said, this is what I experienced, which is I worry about burdening the other person. So I don't mind receiving the no. I'm like, oh, cool, I can take the no, but I'm really worried about imposing on somebody. Also a feeling the person would judge you for asking. Yes, totally, Alex. So I often find that our relationship with asking and being asked is mirror. So if your relationship to asking is like, I have a fear of rejection, then when you are asked, the likelihood is that you're going to be a bit people pleasery and you're going to avoid saying no or being fearful of saying no. Okay. If the fear around asking is like, I'm going to burden that person, then the likelihood is if you're being asked, your fear is going to be, or rather your reaction might be one of being triggered. Like, how dare they like ask me for this thing? That's such an imposition that they've asked me, I don't know, for, they've asked me if they can use my house, how dare they, like, right? There's a sense of like feeling imposed on. If you have either of those reactions, right, it basically puts you in what I call, you're part of the guessers in the world. I've divided the population into askers and guessers. So if you are a guesser, okay, this is how you probably experience it. Let me see if I can just bring out this. It's just so brilliantly explained. Okay, so people raised in a guess culture are taught that any request you make imposes a serious obligation on the other person. So you should never ask lightly. They're also taught that turning down a request, especially from someone close to you, is a serious rejection that can threaten the relationship. So you're supposed to figure out in advance whether or not a request is going to be acceptable, and you're never supposed to ask for something that the other person isn't willing to do. This means that guessers agonize about making requests and about saying no to someone else's requests. They also think that anyone who repeatedly makes thoughtless requests, ones that get no answers, is selfish, rude, and insensitive. Okay, so I don't know who here relates to being a guesser. I mean, I am definitely a recovering guesser. I'm just going to basically pop this in the chat. And that can be contrasted with being an asker. An asker is just going to ask, like, whether or not the chances of the yes or no is high or not. They're like, cool, let me ask. That person can take care of themselves. So that, again, it's about this idea of like taking agency, taking responsibility for your needs. And it's okay that you might be conditioned to be part of the guessing culture, but just know that that means that you're in this guessing culture, and can you make the move into being part of the asking culture? All right, I'm going to play a game about the most important skill in receiving. The first, it's not the most, it's one of the primary skills, and that is choosing. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Oh, by the way, any questions so far? I feel like I'm plowing through this very quickly. So if there's any questions on asking versus guessing culture or anything so far, feel free to put it in the chat. And if I miss anything, by the way, Marianne, please let me know, because I haven't been able to read everything. Yeah, okay, beautiful. So one of the first skills, okay, so when we are giving and receiving, a lot of our attention is on the touch itself, right? We put a lot of attention on that. And what we're not doing is paying attention to choosing. Now, the act of choosing has far more impact on the experience than the touch itself. So what do I mean by that? So often what happens is when we're giving and receiving, we're just kind of being a passive recipient to what's happening. You know, like me and Marianne are like maybe we're together and like I'm caressing her hair or whatever it is that I'm doing. And we're just relying on there to be this effortless, like maybe she's the one receiving and she's not actively choosing what happens to her. She's not saying, hey, Haneen, I noticed actually that I don't really want my hair touched. I'd actually really like it if you could just like tickle my neck or something like that, right? So we really need to do the very, very basic skill is to notice what it is that you actually want. And the noticing part can be really awkward and it takes time. So can you commit to the awkwardness of waiting, right? Can you slow down? And if you notice things are going really fast and clothes are coming off and there's like all this high energy, can you realize that and say, hey, I'd love to pause for a moment and just connect to myself? Or, hey, I'd love to take a moment to breathe together, or just look into your eyes, or connect to what I want. There are so many ways in which you can take the time to notice, slow down, and then therefore notice, right? In that space between the stimulus and the response, right? So I'm going to play a game, and all you have to do is just listen to the words, and in your mind, you're going to say red, yellow, or green. So I'm going to say a bunch of different touches, like stroking your hair, biting your cheek, scratching your leg. And in your mind, you're going to say red if it's like, I'm noticing I don't want this touch. Yellow is like, I don't know how I feel about this touch. Green is like, yes, I like this touch. Okay. And to be clear, these touches are for you, you're receiving, right? It's not touches that I want to give to you. I'm giving, you're receiving. Okay. So you can close your eyes if you like, just to tune in. I'm going to throw out a bunch of suggestions. Blowing your face, blowing air on your face. Tying up your hair. Kissing your forehead. Biting your inner thigh. Blowing on your tummy like this. A really gentle scratch down your torso. Squeezing your cheeks. Slapping your bum. Tickling your feet. Picking your nose. Hugging you gently. Looking at you. Putting a hand on your heart. And finally, kissing you on the cheek. So how was that for people? Could people connect to a red, yellow, or green inside them? Was I going too fast? For some people, you might notice it takes some time to get to a red, yellow, or green. Yeah. So we need to figure out what it is that we want before we can receive. That is our primary responsibility, right? It's the giver's responsibility to look after their limits and their boundaries, and it's the receiver's responsibility to notice what they want and communicate that. So that's a whole skill in itself and a whole session in itself. But I'm going to move on to the next stage. So the next stage is to value your desires, and to take them seriously. Because a lot of people might notice, they're like, yeah, I'd actually really love it if you could trace your fingers around my breasts, or if you could kiss me all across my face. But maybe they feel embarrassed by it, or maybe they feel like, it's not sexy enough, or I don't feel worthy enough, right? So it's your relationship to your desires. Okay. And there are so many ways in which we don't take those desires seriously. So what I love getting people to do, and we probably have time for this exercise actually, is to write down a list of, and I'm going to write mine and share them, a list of your identities that you think you have, right? So it could be, I am female, I'm a lawyer, I'm asexual, I am a dancer, I am a perfectionist, I'm a slut, I am whatever it is. So you write down. So I'm going to give you a minute, in fact, if you'd like to do that, just to write down a bunch of your identities. And I'm going to do the same. So like, I am heterosexual, I am polyamorous, I am blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then okay. So it's always a little hard on these things because I'm obviously not sure how many people are taking part. You can continue doing that as I explain the instructions. So you're going to pick a identity, and I'm going to give you 3 of mine, and you're going to consider, how does it impact your ability to receive? Let's say that again. How does it impact your ability to ask for what you want and say no? Because those are really the 2 skills that you need in receiving and giving, is like stating your desires and stating your boundaries, asking for what you want and saying what you don't want, right? Those are the 2 skills. So I'm going to give some examples, right? So my identity as a woman does it make it harder or easier for you? Okay, so my identity as a woman, it makes it harder for me to practice what I want, because I have this perception as a woman that I should be this like easily orgasmic woman, that I shouldn't be too needy, and be like not fussy at all, and that I should just be moaning in ecstasy, right? There's like this identity as a woman that I should be that way, so it makes it harder to take my desires seriously, right? So it impacts me negatively. My identity as a sex coach, right, impacts it positively. So it helped me actually take my desires more seriously, because I actually feel as though I have the permission and that my partner's expecting me to actually advocate for my desires and my boundaries. So I love to like role model that, because that's part of my identity. My identity as a dancer, right? I partner dance as a follower. So I'm quite submissive. I like to follow and to listen. That impacts my ability to ask for what I want negatively, because it means, because I'm trying to almost like be as cooperative as possible, right? So I don't want to be disruptive. And so that makes it much harder for me to ask what I want. So this is a nice exercise for you to do in your own time, to like have a list of the identities that you have and to understand how it impacts your ability to share your desires and share your boundaries. So any questions thus far? Cool. And I think I just wanted to say one thing, which is your desires are beautiful. Your appetite is gorgeous. You should feed it, you should water it, and be proud of it. I feel like so many of us shut down our desires because we live in a world where it's sort of shameful to have them. So really practicing taking up the space, connecting to what you want and celebrating that. That's so, so, so important. That brings me on to my very last point. How to connect with desires, says Ruturaj. Okay, so how do you connect with desires? There's 2 ways to go about this. So either you could do it in a way that's embodied, right? So you might connect with desires by just, even in this moment, taking a breath and noticing what would make your experience right now that little bit more delicious. Can you feel into that? Like just follow the pleasure where it is, right? Rather than being like, I'm expected to blah, blah, blah. This is the touch that I should like, right? It's very easy to get into that mind frame. So how do we connect with what touch just feels good right now? Oh, actually I could really do with like a cold sensation on my skin. My hands are freezing. So that feels really, really nice, right? So there's that embodied connection to desires. And that comes from slowing down. The second way to connect to desires is to do this a bit more cognitively. So you can do things like take the erotic blueprints, like you can do the quiz. It gives you like kind of your flavor of sexuality. It's like the 5 love languages, but for arousal. You might want to do a sex menu, which gives you like a loads of different sort of sex acts, for example, and you can like tick off the ones that you feel excited about. There's loads of different ways. I'll send you an article, actually, probably. In fact, what I'm going to do is send you my link tree, because I have a blog on it. Oh no, actually, no, I know what to do. I'm going to send you this article here. And at the bottom of this article, and I'm glad you asked that question, there is a whole bunch of like exercises that you can do to help you connect with your desires. So my last question is around communication, right? So we've noticed our desires, we value our desires and take them seriously. And then the last piece is like verbally asking for what you want. And so I don't know if we can actually do this exercise because I anticipated there being more video, but basically, maybe you can do this in your head. I'm going to give you a bunch of different scenarios that happen in the bedroom, and you're going to respond maybe in your head or out loud or in the chat, what you could say in that moment, right? So that you are verbalizing. So, okay, I'll give an example. So the situation is somebody is massaging your shoulders, but it's for you and it's way too pressureful. Okay, so if you're in the receiving seat, what do you do? What do you say? This is so absurdly simple.
Ouch, that hurts.
You could say that, but how would that be received potentially? It might feel a bit attacky to say, ouch, that hurts. What could you frame that into a request potentially?
Can you do it a bit gently?
Lovely. Yes, beautiful. So what I would avoid doing is focusing on the negative, which is like, oh, that hurts, or that hurt, that's painful. But I
would like it to be softer.
Right. Yes. I'd love it if you could go a little softer. I'd love that to be more gentle. By the way, Trishna, don't apologize, and you're not wrong. No one's wrong in this. We're all just like humaning here and figuring this out together. Avial, it looks like you have a question. No?
Hello, yes.
Hi.
So, what I wanted to ask you is, I like certain things, like I am a giver. Basically, I am a giver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I like receiving as well, as the whole session is turned out on receiving, right? So I love receiving as well. But the thing with me is, I have had multiple partners, not at the same time, of course, but there's a certain thing that my partner, I'm not able to receive it. Well, it's not about what she does; it's about how she does. Right? Same thing done by different person. I'm not comfortable. Like my desire is not fulfilled.
That makes so much sense. Is there a question in that?
How? So is my desire constant, or is the way it is being done?
Okay.
So
two things on that.
Just a second. If supposedly, if I like, being kissed on the forehead, right? But I don't like it from one, and I like it from other. So is it the sensation of being kissed on the forehead that I like, or is it being the person who kisses me matters?
Thank you for the question. It's a great one. So we are not the same person every day or every minute or what our desires are not set in stone, right? They change from moment to moment, and that our desires are dependent on our context, right? Whether it's our internal context, right? That like my emotional state, I'm stressed out from work, or who's around me, my environment, who my partner is, that all contributes to context. And context affects what we like. So absolutely, Avial, if if your context has changed and it's a different person who you feel less safe with, you might have a different desire in that case. You're like, actually, what I would feel safe with is maybe you just stroke my hand. I'd like that. Or we could hold hands. Or maybe like we could just have an eye gaze together. So that's a beautiful point, because we can't put ourselves in boxes and create like a little user manual and be like, this is how these are all my desires, because your desires are going to change all the time. And I think we often assume that just because a person likes something, you know, on Monday, that they'll like it again on Tuesday. And I think that's where a lot of like, yeah, again, don't assume.
Yes, so I guess we should not, pre-plan stuff, or we should not carry the baggage of the previous, whatever the experience is, right? We should always, be open and be, very neutral minded, I guess, is it?
Yes,
And
exactly.
be accepting new pleasures, desires, touches.
Exactly. Yes, totally. Like we often like to be, we're kind of conditioned to be in a certain script a lot of the time. It's like kissing, foreplay, penis and vagina, or like, you know, there's a certain level of formulaicness, and it is about being more open-minded. Like there's a whole playground that you guys can.
Well, one more question would be there, but I don't think if that aligns with the session as well. Sometimes, I'm basically a giver, as I told you, right? So, yeah. So sometimes the foreplay, I like to go deep. I like to, extend it, right? So sometimes the partner agrees, or is okay with that, and sometimes they don't respond well. When they don't respond well, whole session goes down from my side. So is it also, we should also keep in mind of their desires as well, like what they want to receive, because that's completely opposite to your session right now.
Yes, so that's about the giver, and the giver's responsibility is to share. Look, okay, I really think we need to like let go of this idea of taking care of the other person and worrying about whether they're enjoying themselves.
True.
It is their responsibility. Yeah. So if you're receiving and giving, so if you don't need to be worrying about what their desires are, because they should be able to say, hey, I feel complete, or I feel enough, or they'll just stop, and then they may make a request and say, will you give me a massage? Or may I do this thing to you for my pleasure, or whatever it is. So there should be no guesswork.
But one more thing is that I have one aspect that giving is also, my take is, if I give, I receive more. Like my desires are such like that. But if I give, I enjoy more, right? So it's receiving from me. If I give, the sensations I get back, the responses, everything that I get back, it excites me more.
Yes. So that's like that. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. And if sometimes if what I desired, like what I did, and it did not turn out to be fruitful or something like that, if she didn't like or something like that, so it turns down the whole momentum of the flow.
So in those situations, I think what's needed when this happens is for both of you to like slow down, do a check-in. What is it that both of you actually want, right? There's a difference, like being clear on the roles. Firstly, that's the very first thing I said here. It's like, who is the giver and who is the receiver? When you know who the giver is, and if you know that you are the receiver, then you are in charge of asking and saying, this is what I would love. And the giver might be like, yeah, I'm willing to do that. Or they might be like, fuck, yes, I'd love to give you that. Or they might be like, no, I don't feel like that. And that's kind of what I'm trying to give, this sense of, if there's this confusion and people aren't, if you're not in pleasure, if either of you are not in pleasure, then you're not, one or both of you are out of consent with each other. Giving and receiving should be inherently pleasurable. So if you're noticing that either of you are not enjoying it, like take time out, like, okay, cool, let's take a breath, let's like eye gaze, let's hold hands, whatever that is, and just check in with what you like. And there's a lovely game actually called the 3-minute game. It should be at the bottom of the blog that I wrote. I would highly recommend playing that with people, with your partner, with friends, because I think that would really help practice the skills that I've been talking about today.
Okay.
I'm gonna move on, if that's all right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you
You're
so much.
You're welcome. So I think that's kind of where I want to end on, right? Like I was going to go into boundaries because I think that's like a twin, but I'm not sure we're going to have time. But just to know that when we're communicating, I'm going to keep saying this, we need to be able to receive, you also need to be able to say no, right? Like it's hard to trust someone's yes if you can't trust their no, because you might have a partner who's like, yeah, oh, that's all, yeah, I love it, I love this, I love this, I love this, I love this. And at some point you're like, hang on, they can't be loving everything I'm doing to them. So you start to lose a sense of like trust that they're enjoying this experience. And so my last tip is like, get comfortable, get acquainted, love the word no, and like stop, or I'd like something different. Because if you don't have that, then your yes means shit. Your yes doesn't mean anything if you don't have the capabilities of saying that's enough, or I'd like something different, or no, that doesn't work for me. And I have loads of games to play on this, but maybe a sequel with LUAN will go into like a whole thing of boundaries. I think I'm gonna pause there, and maybe Marianne, if you want to let me know how to navigate the next section, whether it's questions or a tie-up.
Sure, we have been receiving many questions, so if you have a few minutes to address them. The first one is about how does giving and receiving gets in balance? Does it start in our childhood? Does it start, because it doesn't necessarily start when we start, experiencing sexuality, right? Some people don't even like to receive about anything, about money or about opportunities or about anything. When does receiving gets affected?
So I don't know why the question didn't quite land for me. So when does receiving get affected? Could you give
is it when we are children? Does it have to do with the relationship with our parents? Does it have to do with a sense of not feeling worthy? Where do you think, is the root of, having issues with receiving in general?
It's a great question, and definitely requires more than just a couple of minutes of answers, but it's definitely from our conditioning and our upbringing. So if you think of when we grow up, we have our direct influences, our parents, school, maybe religion, the media, just general, there's loads of different spheres of influence. And if you look at each of those little influences, right, when we're kids, we're told like, don't be crying, or eat your vegetables. When you're at work, it's like, make sure you're in on time, make sure you come to this pub social, otherwise, there's pressure for you to like show up and show your face and work really hard. There are so many ways in which there is pressure for us to do something that we don't want to do, from a young age to school to work. There's all of these rules, these pressures, these expectations. And so it teaches us that our desires don't matter in some ways. Like we live in a bit of a non-consensual society. So in a very short summary, it comes from this squashing of desires all throughout, from childhood all the way to now. Like we're probably still getting those messages even in adulthood. So yeah, it's very, very prevalent.
Thank you. Another question that came was, how can we address our intimacy in a different way than the intimacy that we were taught through religions? So for example, we have people here today from many Asian countries, we have people from many Latin American countries, we have people from the UK, from the US, right? And as we can see, it's different approaches that each culture has to intimacy and sexuality. Talking to a broader audience, what would you say would be kind of like the first steps to open up and to heal that intimacy and that sexuality?
Communication is so key with all of this, right? Like if we don't talk, how do we expect anything to change? I also really appreciate that communication can feel incredibly scary and vulnerable depending on what country you're coming from or the potential consequences of that. So if that alone feels scary, I would have a conversation about the fact that having a conversation is feeling vulnerable for you. So starting from that point of view of like, hey, I noticed I'd love to talk to you about our intimate connection. And I also noticed that I feel a lot of fear around it and it feels vulnerable. And then maybe you say what you share, why, like honesty and transparency. Like if we come from a place of love and we're really sharing the insecurity, that makes people want to lean in. And I think where we go wrong is when we start to like go into ego and right and wrong, and we put up these walls or we get angry. Ultimately, we really just we're hardwired for connection. And so just maybe you just have a chat about how to like be able to have conversations safely, right? To take responsibility, because we co-create our relationships, right? It's never just one person's fault, ever. So talking about what your fears are, how would it help, like for me to feel safe to bring up a conversation, I need to have a reassurance that this person is going to stay present with me. And if they're not present with me, that they let me know, right? They say, hey, I'm feeling disengaged. Can we have this conversation later? I would much rather that than that person start blowing up in my face or accusing me or whatever it is. So I would start there. Like that feels more simple. It feels accessible. Can you have just conversation about how you can make conversation feel more safe and accessible? And then start to like prioritize that, like have these what I call maintenance, like these check-ins together every month or every week, and where you're discussing things like your health, your work, projects, family, household, money, sex, whatever it is. We get into this like myth that it should be effortless in our relationships. And I think the best relationships that survive are those that are proactive, that plan, that prioritize, that time together and that conscious communication together.
Totally. And I think it's just, pinpointing what you just said. I think it's also very important not only to have check-ins with your partner, but to have check-ins constantly with you, because we're constantly evolving, right? So the things that we might used to like, are changing, or emotions are changing. So we need to constantly be up to date with our feelings and our desires and our emotions constantly. So then we can be able to communicate them, right? Because sometimes we don't even know what we want, right?
Oh my God, the root of so much. We don't know what we want. It's very, very common. And if that's you, don't worry.
Or we think we want something, and when we get it, wasn't that what we really wanted? No, so it's kind of, no?
Yes. Oh, yes. And guess what? You can change your mind. If you get it and you're like, oh, this isn't what I want, you can actually change your mind. I know it sounds like so simple, but it can feel very prohibitive in the moment to do that, to say that.
Totally. Well, thank you so much, Haneen. This has been a wonderful session. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your magic, with, this feeling about being able to feel open to receive and not having those obligations, or not having those kind of, uncomfortable feelings, and being open to see it through a different perspective. I think when we add different perspectives to topics that we thought there was, a specific way, it enriched the conversation a lot, because it allows us to learn, and especially to unlearn. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. And thank you everyone who has joined today's session from around the world. We had such incredible people coming from different countries around the world. Our next session will be June 29th with Alex Rojas. He's the founder of Mele Flow, and we're going to introduce this concept, which is a holistic method that helps you develop self-awareness, build discipline, and form healthy, long-lasting habits like meditation, exercise, reading, and journaling. His mission is to help people achieve the greatest version of themselves, finding balance between body, mind, and spirit. And they guide you through this journal and some experiences that help you make small steps towards forming these big habits. And we have a surprise for you today, for the people that joined us today. We're at our creative peak when, aside from the circumstances, we know we're capable of figuring out what to do. Building confidence and trusting our ideas, molding them, playing with them, transforming them, it's an adventure itself. Confidence sometimes doesn't come easy, right? So we've developed a course to awaken your inner genius and to develop your creative confidence. In this course, we'll explore how positive thinking, a reframing of our mindset, and the exercise of generating ideas will boost our day-to-day capability in any setting. How are we going to do that? Taking advantage of art to know ourselves and to generate new ideas on the go. Today, we have a special gift for you. For the first 15 people to send an email to hey@luanmuseoemocional.com, Hazel is going to share it on the chat, will get this course completely free. I'm going to repeat that. The first 15 people to send an email to hey@luanmuseoemocional.com will get this course completely free. Don't miss out. Join us, the Map to a Creative Mind course. And we encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on Instagram and YouTube for the latest news. Also, Haneen, if you can share your contact information, I saw a lot of people writing and asking for your contact so they can write to you directly. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Haneen. Have a fantastic afternoon, a great evening, and a wonderful rest of the day. Stay safe, be healthy. Thank you.
One last tiny thing.
Yes.
If anyone join my course, which I run in September, it's a delicious 9-week sex and intimacy course to dive deeper into this. I'd love to offer it at 30% off, actually, if anyone's interested in it. So just message me, but I will pop my link tree in at the very, very end. I think I have. Yeah. So message me. Here we go. hello@sexhomeworksociety.com. I really enjoyed this. I'd love to do a sequel, so maybe I'll see you all again.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Take care all. Bye.
Thank you.